I think it's safe to say that change is on my agenda. Change for good. And I embrace that and I enjoy that change. I don't fear it.
Just a few weeks ago, during the final rehearsal for the Royal Ascot event, Prince William became furious when he entered the rehearsal area and discovered that Queen Camilla's family had been placed in seats traditionally reserved exclusively for the direct line of succession. The atmosphere instantly froze. Royal aides exchanged worried glances while Princess Catherine tried to keep everything normal before William quietly left amid a heavy silence. But what truly made William lose his composure was not just the changed seating. He believed someone was deliberately attempting to alter the power dynamics within the royal family, right before a highly sensitive moment. Even more alarming, all the evidence he found pointed directly toward Camilla. Was this merely a protocol error, or the first move in a battle for influence inside Buckingham Palace? The final rehearsal for Royal Ascot took place in an unusually tense atmosphere at Ascot Racecourse in June this year. This was not merely a major social event, but an occasion for the whole world to watch the image of the British royal family. Millions of eyes would be focused here in just a few days. Prince William entered the hall with his usual calm demeanor. He had just finished the security check with his team, and the role of heir apparent was becoming increasingly evident on his shoulders. Catherine walked beside him gently, discussing the family's order of appearance with the aides. Everything seemed still under control, until William stopped in his tracks. His gaze locked onto the large seating chart displayed in the center of the main area, a chart he had personally approved weeks earlier. But what he saw now was completely different. Queen Camilla's family, including her sister Annabel Elliot and her 2 children from a previous marriage, had been placed in the most central positions right next to King Charles and Camilla. The seats that should have belonged to William, Catherine, and their children had been shifted noticeably to the right into clearly secondary positions. It wasn't just 1 or 2 seats. An entire block for Camilla's family had taken over the core royal enclosure. The atmosphere suddenly thickened. The initial murmuring fell silent. William stood motionless, his hand gripping the documents so tightly that the paper crumpled. His face, gradually hardened lips, pressed into a thin line. The anger did not explode, but it was clearly rising in every gesture. A senior aide standing nearby panicked and hurriedly flipped through his own documents. "Your Highness, we will check this immediately," he stammered, his voice trembling. Other staff members looked at each other. No one dared speak. Everyone in the palace understood an unbreakable rule: seating positions in the British royal family are never random. Every centimeter carries meaning regarding power hierarchy and political messaging. Placing Camilla's family in the center of the royal box was an implicit statement that they were gradually becoming an inseparable part of the royal core. Catherine immediately noticed the change in her husband's expression. She stepped closer, her voice soft but firm, trying to maintain calm in front of everyone. "William, we still have many things to check. Don't jump to conclusions." William turned to his wife, his eyes filled with clear disappointment mixed with rage. He didn't answer immediately, only shook his head slightly. Catherine gently squeezed his arm, trying to pass on some calm. She knew exactly what her husband was thinking. This was not just about seats. This was a calculated move testing his limits right before King Charles's health declined further. The air grew increasingly suffocating. The aides began exchanging hurried glances and whispers. A female secretary shakily noted something in her notebook, while the head of royal protocol wiped sweat from his forehead. They understood that if not handled carefully, this could leak out and become a major scandal. Royal Ascot was a traditional event broadcast live, attracting millions of viewers. A small mistake here could shake the image of the entire reign. William took a deep breath, then suddenly turned and walked away. His footsteps were decisive without any further explanation. Catherine tried to call after him softly, "William, wait for me." But he was already gone. The sound of his footsteps echoed in the temporary corridor set up for the rehearsal. The remaining team stood stunned. no one dared follow. Inside Buckingham Palace, the news spread like wildfire. Within less than an hour, the royal offices were buzzing. Internal phones rang non-stop. Senior advisors were urgently summoned. No one dared speak loudly, but everyone understood a silent crisis had just begun. After leaving the rehearsal, William sat in the car heading back to Clarence House without saying a word. His face remained tense, eyes staring out the window, but his mind was clearly elsewhere. Catherine sat beside him, worriedly. Placing her hand on his butt, he only squeezed it lightly before letting go. The anger was still simmering, not exploding, but strong enough for him to make an immediate decision. As soon as he stepped into his private office, William called his closest chief of staff. His voice was low but full of authority. Immediately collect all versions of the seating charts and guest lists that were approved 3 weeks ago. Compare them with today's version. I want to see the differences down to every centimeter. The aides sprang into action. Within 2 hours, stacks of documents were brought to William's desk. The warm yellow desk lamp illuminated the white pages, while outside London's sky had begun to darken. When comparing the two versions, William felt a chill run down his spine. The original chart, the one he had signed off on, placed Camilla's family only in Zone 2, honorable, but clearly not central. The version that appeared at the rehearsal was completely different. Her family had been moved to the center of the royal box, right next to King Charles and Camilla. There was no note, no confirmation signature from William's office. "This is impossible," William muttered, gripping the edge of the desk tightly. Our office never received any notification of changes. He ordered a full check of the internal email system and meeting minutes. The results left him even more stunned. Not a single document mentioned adjusting the seating. No calls, no additional meetings. Everything seemed to have been changed secretly, right under his nose. William stood up and paced the room. Catherine entered at that moment, carrying a cup of hot tea. She placed it on the desk, her voice gentle but full of concern. "What did you discover?" William turned his eyes, showing clear disappointment mixed with fury. "They changed it without consulting us. Camilla's family is now sitting right in the center, as if they were an indispensable part of the line of succession. This is not an administrative error. This is a deliberate act." Catherine remained silent for a moment, then nodded slightly. She understood her husband's worries better than anyone, as the future King William was witnessing a quiet effort to gradually change the public's perception of the royal family. If Camilla's family appeared in the central positions at Royal Ascot, a live televised event watched by millions, the public would gradually become accustomed to viewing them as an official part of the center of power. "Camilla is testing our reaction," William continued, his voice lower. "She wants to create a precedent. If this succeeds, it will be easier next time. Then gradually, the public will think her family has equal rights to ours." He paused, looking out the window. Outside, the trees in the Clarence House garden swayed in the evening breeze. William clearly felt the heavy pressure on his shoulders. His father, King Charles, was growing weaker. The time for the transfer of power was approaching. And Camilla did not seem willing to wait passively. Catherine looked at her husband, her eyes filled with solid support. "So what do you plan to do?" William returned to his desk, sat down, and opened his laptop. "Continue the investigation. This time, I will not let everything pass in silence. We need to know who is behind it and how far they have gone." That night, the lights in William's office stayed on. His team worked in shifts, poring over old emails and meeting minutes. William did not sleep. He sat there, the feeling of betrayal surging in his heart. The next morning, as the sun was just rising, William already had a list of irregularities in hand. This was not just a small change. This was the first test move in a long-term plan. And he knew clearly that if not stopped now, the future of the royal family would face deeper fractures. To understand the whole story, let's go back a few months. The atmosphere within the British royal family had been quietly tense like an underground river flowing strongly beneath a thin layer of ice. King Charles was growing weaker. Discreet medical examinations showed that the king's health was no longer stable. William, as the direct heir, began taking on more responsibilities. This made Camilla realize a harsh truth. When William ascended the throne, her position and that of her family would gradually be pushed to the margins. She refused to accept it. Camilla began to act. The first quiet disputes occurred in early spring. During a national ceremony at the palace, the guest list was suddenly edited. 3 high-ranking relatives of Camilla were added to positions of honor without going through William's office. Then came the incident on the Buckingham Palace balcony. During a public appearance for an important royal commemoration, the standing order was changed at the last minute. Camilla and 2 relatives were moved closer to the center, while William and Catherine were shifted aside. The live broadcast clearly showed this change. The public began to whisper. Some tabloids quickly ran stories about the elevation of Queen Camilla's family. But Camilla's response grew stronger. She believed she was being threatened. In a private conversation with her trusted secretary, she said in a voice full of bitterness and determination, "I have sacrificed so much to be by Charles's side. I will not allow them to erase my family and me just because of the bloodline. If William becomes king, we will have no place left. We must act now." From then on, Camilla began bribing and pressuring some mid-level palace staff. She promised them positions, privileges, and protection if they supported her. Changes to seating order of appearance and guest lists began appearing more frequently. Each time William quietly objected, Camilla would retreat a step only to test another move later. William clearly sensed the danger. He worried that if the public gradually became accustomed to seeing Camilla's family in central positions at major events, they would misunderstand the structure of royal succession. That could undermine the traditional foundations the House of Windsor had built over hundreds of years. He did not want an open conflict with his stepmother, especially while his father was seriously ill, but he also could not sit still. The conflicts accumulated gradually. Camilla became increasingly convinced she would be completely sidelined when William took the throne. She no longer had the patience to wait. Royal Ascot, an event watched by the whole world with live and uncontrollable images, became the perfect target. She decided to push harder than ever. Camilla thought she was playing a clever game of chess, but she did not expect that William, once considered timid and conflict avoidant, was ready to strike back more forcefully than ever. The next morning, while London's sun had not yet dispelled the morning mist, William summoned his most trusted team of aides into his private office at Clarence House. The atmosphere in the room was heavy. No one dared speak loudly. These were people he trusted, absolutely aides who had been with him since his military days. People who knew the prince's determined nature once he set his mind to something. William stood in front of his desk, his voice low but sharp. Check the entire process of editing the Royal Ascot seating chart, from the first version to the final one. I want to know exactly who changed it when and why. The team immediately got to work. They reviewed hundreds of internal emails, meeting minutes approval schedules, and the digital archiving system. The work proceeded in silence, accompanied only by the sound of typing and turning pages. William stood by the window, arms crossed, gaze distant, but mind racing at full speed. 2 hours later, the chief of staff approached with a grave expression. He placed 2 seating charts on William's desk. The differences are completely clear. William leaned down to examine them. The original version, the one he had approved 3 weeks earlier, placed Camilla's family only in Zone 2 in a more modest position. But the final version had changed dramatically. Her entire family block had been moved straight to the center, occupying the most prestigious positions. There were no explanatory notes, no confirmation signature from William's office. "This cannot be a mistake," William muttered, his voice full of rage. Who approved the final file? Michael, a senior official in the Royal Protocol Office, was urgently summoned. When he entered the room, he was already deathly pale. William did not beat around the bush. He placed the two charts in front of Michael and looked him straight in the eye. "Explain this to me. What is going on?" Under the heavy pressure of the heir's gaze, Michael could no longer deny it. He bowed his head, voice trembling. "Well, I received instructions from Queen Camilla's office the afternoon before the rehearsal. They said it was a request from above and needed urgent changes to demonstrate family unity." William clenched his fists so tightly that his knuckles turned white. The anger was rising, but he still held it in check. He pressed further, and Michael gradually revealed more. Not only Camilla, but some of King Charles's longtime advisors had also been informed of the change beforehand. They knew, but chose to remain silent and not object. Some even said, "We shouldn't make a big deal out of it." Michael added, his voice quieter. William felt betrayed. The advisors his father had trusted for many years had sided with Camilla. They were choosing safety over principle. He turned away, trying to suppress his emotions. Catherine entered the room at that moment and immediately sensed the tension. She stood beside her husband, gently placing a hand on his shoulder. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. William shook his head, his voice heavy with worry. "They didn't just change it once. This is a test. If it succeeds without a strong reaction, they will continue with future events. The Buckingham balcony, trooping the color, even the coronation and later. They want to gradually create precedents, making the public accustomed to Camilla's family sitting at the center of power." What worried William most was this long-term calculation. This was not an immediate scandal-creating plot for headlines. This was a patient step-by-step strategy to change public perception of the royal structure. If the public saw Camilla's family in central positions regularly, they would gradually accept that she and her relatives had a role as important as the Windsor bloodline. William paced the room, his voice more determined. "We cannot let this continue. From now on, all seating charts and guest lists for major royal family events, including Royal Ascot trooping the color and national ceremonies, must receive final approval from my office. This is not a suggestion. It is a new regulation." No one objected. Even those who had previously leaned toward Camilla remained silent. They were beginning to realize clearly William was no longer the young prince who only smiled for the cameras. He was becoming the real center of power. And siding with Camilla now meant betting on the wrong future. News of William's secret investigation reached Camilla faster than she had imagined. That same afternoon, a trusted aide entered her private room with a worried face and trembling voice. "Your Majesty, Prince William, is having all the files checked. They have summoned Michael and are digging deep into emails and seating chart edit records." Camilla was sitting at her afternoon tea table holding a cup of hot tea. The moment she heard the news, she gripped the cup so tightly it shook slightly. Her face remained outwardly calm, but a flash of worry mixed with anger appeared in her eyes. She had prepared for many scenarios, but she had not expected William to act so quickly and decisively. "William, the boy has decided to make a big deal out of this," Camilla whispered coldly. She set the cup down, stood up and paced the room. "We cannot let anything be exposed. We must clean everything up immediately." She immediately summoned her private secretary, a woman who had been loyal to her for many years. Camilla's voice was sharp, allowing no hesitation. "Delete everything. All emails related to the Royal Ascot seating edits. Delete the meeting schedules, minutes, and all drafts. I don't want any trace left in the system." The secretary nodded and immediately sat at the computer. Her fingers typed quickly, deleting messages and attachments one by one. Camilla stood beside her, supervising closely. She knew that in the palace, everything could be monitored, but she also understood how the internal system worked. Some emails were moved to the deleted folder and then permanently erased. The seating chart edit history was replaced with a new version, noting it was a last-minute logistical adjustment. She didn't stop there. Camilla summoned the team of aides who had directly participated in changing the seats. They stood in a line in the room, the atmosphere tense as a stretched string. Camilla looked at each one, her gaze sharp as a blade. Listen carefully. If anyone asks, you are only to say this was a last-minute logistical error. There was no instruction from me, no deliberate change. Anyone who says otherwise will end their career immediately. I will make sure of that.
The aides nodded frantically. Some turned deathly pale. They knew Camilla was not joking. She had been in the palace long enough to know how to use power and fear to control others. Next was Michael, the one who had approved the final file. Camilla requested a private meeting. When Michael entered, she got straight to the point. She looked him in the eye, her voice both sweet and threatening. "Michael, you have done very well so far. But I hear William is applying pressure. I need you to completely deny receiving instructions from my office. Say it was a technical error. If you do this, I will take care of your future, perhaps even a better position later. But if you betray me, you know the consequences." Michael bowed his head, his voice trembling, but trying to stay calm. "Yes, I understand. I will request to resign to avoid any trouble."
Camilla smiled with satisfaction, thinking she had the situation under control. She patted his shoulder lightly, her voice gentler. "You are very wise. This is just a small misunderstanding. William is still young. He will learn to compromise for family harmony." When Michael left the room, Camilla stood alone by the window looking out at the garden. She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself. Deep down, she still believed she was doing the right thing. She had fought for many years to reach her current position. She could not let William ruin everything just because of rigid rules about bloodline and hierarchy. "My family also deserves a place," she thought bitterly with determination.
What Camilla did not know was that Michael had already chosen William's side earlier. The recent meeting was just an act. He had recorded the entire conversation and passed it to William's team immediately after leaving. While Camilla was confident she had erased all traces, William's investigation networks grew even tighter. She thought she was leading the game, but in reality, she was walking deeper into the trap she had unintentionally set.
The shadow of the confrontation grew ever thicker, and Camilla, despite her experience, had not yet realized that this time her opponent was no longer the timid young prince.
The next morning, an important internal meeting was urgently convened at Clarence's house. The atmosphere in the meeting room was oppressively heavy. Weak sunlight filtered through the windows, but could not dispel the chill that enveloped everything. King Charles was absent due to health reasons, leaving William to chair the meeting. This was the first time William sat in the center as the real decision-maker. Camilla entered the room with her usual calm demeanor. She wore formal attire, her hair perfectly styled. A slight smile still played on her lips, as if everything was just a minor misunderstanding. She nodded to everyone and sat down, unaware that this would be one of the most difficult moments of her life in many years. William opened the meeting with a calm but authoritative voice. He did not beat around the bush. He turned on the large screen and displayed all the evidence his team had collected, the 2 versions of the seating chart chains of internal emails, edit minutes, and even the recording of Camilla's conversation with Michael. The entire room fell silent. As the emails clearly appeared on the screen with direct instructions from Camilla's office, Camilla's face gradually lost color. The smile on her lips froze. She clenched her hands under the table nails, digging into her skin. William looked straight at her, his voice low but sharp as a blade. This was not a logistical error. This was a deliberate act to change the royal hierarchy without the consent of the heir. "Stepmother, do you have anything to explain?" Camilla tried to stay composed. She took a deep breath, her voice still attempting to sound strong. "William, you are blowing a small matter out of proportion. I only wanted our family to show more unity before the big event. There was no other intention." But William was well prepared.
He presented more evidence: Michael's testimony, the email deletion history, and the suspicious silence of some advisors. Each piece of evidence landed like a precise strike. The atmosphere in the room grew increasingly suffocating. The advisors on both sides of the table looked down at their documents. No one dared speak up in Camilla's defense. William continued, his voice firm. From now on, all seating charts and guest lists for major royal family events, including Royal Ascot trooping the color and national ceremonies, must receive final approval from my office. This is not a proposal. It is a new regulation. No one objected. Even those who had previously leaned toward Camilla remained silent. They were beginning to realize clearly William was no longer the young prince who only smiled for the cameras. He was becoming the real center of power. And siding with Camilla now meant betting on the wrong future. Camilla sat there, humiliation surging through her. She had been by Charles's side for many years and had endured countless public criticisms, only to now be exposed in front of people who once respected her. She looked at William, her eyes filled with disappointment and anger, but she no longer had the strength to argue. The meeting ended in silence. As everyone left the room, the advisors began avoiding Camilla's gaze. Some who had once promised to support her now only nodded vaguely and hurried away. They were choosing sides, and William's side was clearly rising. That afternoon, Camilla received an official written notice. She would not attend Royal Ascot this year for personal schedule and health reasons. This was the palace's polite way of avoiding a public scandal. But internally, everyone understood this was a form of quiet disciplinary action. Camilla stood alone in her private room, holding the notice, her gaze distant. She clearly felt the isolation closing in around her. All the efforts she had made over many months, all her clever calculations, had crumbled in just one meeting. This year's Royal Ascot would still proceed brilliantly without Queen Camilla's presence. The public would only see the image of William and Catherine smiling confidently, the royal family united. They would not know that behind it was a silent war that had forever changed the balance of power inside the palace. If you were Prince William, would you view Camilla's actions of changing the seats as a power conspiracy or merely an oversensitivity within the royal family? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section. Remember to like, share, and subscribe for more. Also, click the next video showing on your screen. You will enjoy.